Hello, welcome back to 3D Drawing for Your Model Railway. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at drawing the next module along. It's getting a little bit more complicated now. We've got some different shapes going on here. There's a platform on the side here. If we just change to this picture, it's got like a frame on the side, a couple of beams going across. This has then got some uprights. It's got a conduit on with some cables that go up the side. I think this is a control desk really for the equipment, and it looks like this hinges up and over, and obviously that panel's at an angle. If we look at the front on picture, all this cabling underneath, again I don't think it's going to print, so I don't think there's a lot of point printing it. It's one of those things that I think would be better if you just stick some wire across the bottom here, because it is a rat's nest really of hydraulic piping. So yeah, again I think a lot of this is going to be just glue on some wire afterwards and then create it as like a bit of a kit. We've also got a couple of hydraulic pumps maybe on the side here, each side. So again we're going to go with a bit of a representation of it. Maybe add a little bit of detail, but nothing too spectacular, because again, printing wise, it's going to be difficult to achieve. Okay, so if we jump into Fusion, we're going to get rid of cab, roof, toolbox, and the fuel tank. I'm going to keep the fuel tank for the moment. I'm going to keep the chassis on there. Okay, let's go back to the top, create a new component. And I'm going to call this one control panel. Okay, so the control panel will sit in that sort of position there. I've got measurements again off of Paul's, but we've got 48 inches wide, 31 inches from the back of this panel to possibly the front here, and then 16 inches. So let's start to flesh that out. So make sure the control panel's selected, and we'll create a center point vector, create a sketch actually on this surface here. We're going to use a center point rectangle, find it in the midpoint along there, because we know it's really reasonably centered. I'm just going to drag that out. Let's start, as I say, let's start to look at the size. It's got 48 inches wide, so using our calculator again, 48 inches is 1219. 1219 divided by 148. Okay, next dimension, 16 inches for the width of the panel. The bottom stand, the width of the bottom stand, 406 millimeters. 6 divided by 148. Okay, and then so looking at this, I'm thinking it's a 31-inch gap from the end of the fuel tank to the beginning of the control panel. 31 inches is 787. So as I say, I'm thinking from there, let's get this right on the corner here to there. So 787. So that's quite a big gap. So if we have a look at the photos, I'm just going to check that looks about right. Show it maybe. Yeah, there is quite a big gap there, because we've got what looks like a fan or a radiator in there. Yeah, there's definitely quite a large gap there, so yeah, we're going to go with that. And then if we need to, we come back and change that. This one's defined. Okay, so then if we look at height, actually, we've got height of this panel. There. not sure. Like these measurements are for the radiator and stuff here. So we're looking at 12 inches for that panel there. So if we extrude that upwards, 12 inches, just to get an exact, 304.8. 304.8 divided by 1.8. Okay, so that's going to give us the stand at the base everything's going to be built off of. Okay, so looking at the photos, the two ends are just pretty much plates with two beams going across. Now, we could draw that, but these would be over thick. Yeah, okay, let's try it. So if we turn off the chassis and the fuel tank, now we don't need it. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is going to create a sketch on the top surface. Again, going to be using a center point rectangle. Let's find the center. And we'll just drag it out like so. And then we're going to define the outside edges. So I'm going to go for 0.6 millimeters on each end. Like that. And then the same on these two as well. Okay. And then you can extrude this through to the other side. That gives you your... Why is that not gone all the way through? Interesting. Let's check that feature, why it's not done that. Let's just drag it down a little bit lower, it'll go all the way through, it'll be fine. Okay, if we create now a sketch on this side, this one we're not going to use a center point rectangle because we don't need anything at the bottom. Just drag the rectangle across and dimension top line, again 0.6, same on the sides. You could use mirror constraint to do that, but I find it's just as quick to type those numbers in, and it's not going to make any difference because we're not going to go back and change that. Again, I wonder why is that not going all the way through? Weird. That's weird why it was doing that. Okay, so now we've got that stand. If we look at the photographs, we've now got larger upright coming off of the front. Okay, a lot of this is going to be symmetrical, so we will be able to, because we've got the mirror plane, we'll be able to copy things across. So if we draw this upright, make sure we've got it the right way around. So fuel tanks on this side, so we're going to draw upright on there. It's going to be 0.6. I'm going to go for 0.7 on the width, just to make it a little bit wider there. Okay, so how far in do we think that is? A foot maybe? So from there to there, give it a foot. And if we extrude this upwards. Okay, height wise, looking at the photos here, the only height that pulls constrained is 43 inches from the top corner of the panel to the bottom. So at the moment, I'm just going to drag this up, just so we've got an upright there, that we can then create a plane at an angle off of this edge. And I'm just going to create an angle on the panel that looks about right, maybe 35 degrees, and then we create a sketch off of that, which we don't have dimensions for the panel. there's no dimension for the actual width of the panel itself. So again, we're going off of pictures. It's slightly wider than these two uprights. So if we dimension it, going to be maybe 5mm from that corner. We just drag across like this, from there to there. If we do that like that, yeah, that works for me. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump back a little bit in the history and then mirror that feature. If we come up to our construction planes at the top, that's our mid plane. If we mirror across that mid plane, then we know symmetrically this is in the same both sides, should be, which is not for some reason. Okay, so looking at that, it looks like this hasn't drawn correctly at the bottom. So if we just edit this sketch and find out what's, yeah, there you go. You can see it's not constrained to the midline. Okay, let's draw a line, construction line from the midpoint. And then we can then constrain that to the midpoint. No. Okay, that shouldn't be moving. Let's fix that in position and then constrain that. There we go. There you go. Now they're in the same position. Okay, so now I've fixed that, I'm going to go back in the history. So we get back to this panel. And define. So we'll go back into the sketch history. That's it. Define this to that corner. There's 1 mm. There's 1 millimeter also. So we know that's now going to be the same both sides. Okay, size of the panel itself. Haven't really got any measurements for it. So it's just going to have to be sort of done by eye. So if we look at maybe this picture here, see there's maybe 1.5 foot or so. 2.8 millimeters. And then we define position relative to that square there. So 1. And then if we extrude this, extrude it downwards to join. Now what we can do is we can inspect the height from the top there to the floor. So we've got 5.92 millimeters. So now its height is 43 inches. If we just grab a calculator here. 43, no, sorry, clear that. 1092 divided by 148, 7.37 millimeters. So we know we need to increase the height here by 1.4 millimeters. So we can just go back in our history to close that. Back in history where we raise these, edit feature, make that 3.9. we can now check that the top corner to the bottom's 7.9. So, you know, we worked out at 7.3, it's now 6.9. That's close enough, I think. We may need to move the position here relative to the posts. Yeah, it needs to be down a bit more, I think. So if we come back into Fusion, edit that sketch, we increase that to 2mm. That looks better to me. The posts coming upwards look like they go into the rear of this panel. I might just change that ever so slightly actually. Make it 1.8, just bring this back a little bit. Okay, so I think that gives us a better look there than we had a second ago, so relatively happy with that. Okay, so if we look at this picture, we can see we've got a couple of extra posts that come up that this conduit sits on. So they look like they're in the same position as those two main posts there. So just come back into Fusion, sketch on here, slice through so we can see what we're looking at. And we've got two rectangles like that. And then we can use constraints to make sure they match. Okay, I'll come back to that in a minute. Okay, it's not doing it for some reason, so let's project those points to that one there. Okay, so now I can constrain that to that, that to that, and that to that. So we know they're going to be in the same position there no matter what. Select those two profiles, we can extrude them upwards. If we have a look again on the pictures, maybe you come up a foot or so. Yeah, I'm going to go about 1.5mm, I think. And then they come across and join into here. Slice, I'm going to project those points down the edges there. And we can just draw rectangles that come across. Those two profiles, and I'm just going to drag this down. I'm actually not going to do it that thick, I'm going to go about 0.3 because it's quite small and it's going between two well supported parts. That should print okay. Okay, and then we've got this conduit that comes across about halfway along, I think. Looking at that, let's have a look on these pictures. Yeah, about halfway along. Not the clearest on that picture there, probably. This one's a little bit better, you can see it there. So come back into Fusion there, we can draw a sketch off of that surface. It is longer than those legs coming across. You can define distance from that line. I'm going to do 0.4mm. Same one. Up from there. Define the width. So 0.5. And distance from the edge to the front edge of the panel. And we'll go 0.9. select these profiles, and then we can extrude up. And obviously turn it to join. Okay, so looking now with the rest of the model turned on, you can see how that's given us that basic shape, which is coming out okay. It will be quite difficult to print this part. You're probably going to be orientating it and supporting it in some quite awkward directions, I think, but you know, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I think it'll be no harder than getting this to print. Okay, so let's start to think about adding some of the details onto here now. Okay, so the first detail I'm going to try and work on is these parts here on the end. Now, again, they're going to be quite awkward to get all this detail in. I think I'm just going to do some smaller rectangles coming upwards. You know, your basic square type shape. Yeah, I think that's the way we're going to go with that. And then obviously I don't have to draw one of them, we can mirror it across. Just drawing on there, let's turn all this off. Okay, does it sit below the control panel? No, it's slightly to the side. In this area here. Control panel might actually be a little bit too wide. Might just narrow that up a bit, I think. Edit that sketch. Make that 0.8mm. Go back onto the sketch for the end here. Okay, so let's draw. So it overhangs slightly at the front, so I think what I'm going to do is snap to this corner here and just extrude forward slightly. So 1mm by 0.5mm, and then we can extrude this up a little bit. Like that. And then a smaller box on top. It's this sort of thing I'm sort of aiming at there. Detail wise, if you wanted to spend hours drawing every little single part of that, you can, but I don't think there's much need really. Okay, and then we can mirror this across. So that part, that one, it's connected to the back there. Okay, let's go about this a different way. Let's cheat slightly. Cheat slightly is always a good way to cheat. always cheap. That. It says we can cheat. Okay, let's undo these. Undo that. Okay. Edit that. Tell it to be a new body. Jump to the end. Okay. We can mirror. Change that to a body. So now we're mirroring that body. Mirror plane, we're going to be using that center one here. And then we can combine the original body with those two. Okay, now we've got these in. Okay, I'm going to try and show you how to do something that we've not done before, and that's a 3D line. So we're going to be going from this point here upwards. I'm just going to create a pipe that's going to act as this conduit. Now this one I think we will be able to print because it's relatively thick, and when we print, or when I print this, I'm thinking I'm going to orientate this to start printing this corner. So these will be connected as they go up and will help to form that. Okay, so initially I'm going to create a sketch on this front surface here, and I'm just going to put a point in the middle. I'm then going to create a sketch on this top surface, and the same thing, I'm going to create a point, find the midpoint there, and then there's no midpoint here, unfortunately. I'm just going to go somewhere in the middle, that there. So we've got 2 points now. Okay, so now we want to try and draw the line between these two. So we're going to create a sketch on that front surface there. I'm going to use spline points. Let's draw a few coming down like that. So we've got 5 spline points there. I'm just going to coincidence that one to that point there. Okay, so now I'm going to want to try and move these around a little bit. So again, we're going to coincidence that one. We won't grab that point. So what we can do is, if we do move copy, and first of all we'll just drag this across to that point. Then we'll get the next one, and we'll bring that across a bit more. This curve's being created because the next one there is so far over. As you bring it back, you see it sort of straightens it out a little bit. Next one. This one probably wants to go a bit more. And this is sort of a, just play around with it, get them where you want them to be. Okay, so that's that side. I think that sort of looks okay coming up there. We'll rotate it around this direction, and you can see these need to move across slightly. Bring that there. So now you can see I'm starting to get the shape that I want. That needs to come down a little bit, so it's actually going into the part there. Let's check this one's going in. That's coincidence, that point, that's fine. So that's sort of giving us a pipe shape there that, you know, okay. Let's try now if we do a pipe on that line. So it's initially gone to 0.2. Let's see what we can get it to. You get quite large here. So I think 0.4 is about the sort of size that's going to sit okay on this panel. You see how we've got that pipe now going in 3 dimensions rather than just sitting on one profile. You can sit and play around with that if you wanted to. See, something here is not quite right. So I'm going to actually click on OK there, and then I'm going to come round, grab that profile there, click on extrude. I'm just going to do that, tell it to join, and that just fills in that gap there on the corner. Let's check down the bottom here. Similar situation here. I think. Yep. So again, grab that profile underneath and just extrude it in, tell it to join, and then that's all the holes filled up on that. Okay, and then click on OK there. So you can see now we've now got that's a nice little shape there. You could use this technique for all those pipes that we mentioned before if you wanted to do it in the larger scales. But as I said, in N-gauge, I don't think you're going to get particularly great effect coming off from the majority of these, especially these ones that are all going to be down here. And these are going to be tiny. If we've done 0.4 for that, you're probably looking at 0.15, 0.2 for these, and they will be tiny. Just will not print, I don't think. Okay, so one thing I'm going to draw on next is just put sort of like a panel coming out the top in here that I can then just drag a load of wires, black wires, once I've printed this, coming out the bottom to represent this rat's nest here. So yeah, as I say, just creating a sketch on this inner surface there. So just in this area here, and snap to these two corners. Just come out maybe 1.2, and then that's going to give me a little bit of room under here that I can attach some wires into. Just select that profile, it's going to extrude it upwards, maybe 0.5 millimeter will do. Yeah, and then what I can do, let's just glue some wires on the bottom here. Okay, there was a load of boxes coming across the top here, so again we can just create that on the surface, slicing through. Let's go 1.2, I'm happy with, let's go 0.3. Dimension that 0.2. So how many were there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. If we extrude this 0.3 upwards, and then if we rectangular pattern, solid sound features, hopefully it'll allow me to do it. Okay, I'm going to have to go faces, select faces. Rectangular pattern, faces, that one, that one. Direction coming across the model. We said there were 6 of them. Work. Okay, I might want to change that gap slightly there. It's just giving that representation there of whatever these valves are potentially here. And then detail wise, the next thing is we're going to be looking at, I think it's some sort of radiator here, and you can see how it's half buried into the floor. So we're going to have, I'm going to draw it complete and then extrude the bottom half off where the floor level is. Again, I'm not going to do the fine detail. This sort of stuff isn't going to show up. I will draw a pipe coming out the side here, but not coming downwards or upwards, because that again will be fine. We're just using a little bit of wire. Okay, so if we come back into Fusion, it's going to be on this rear surface here. So initially I'm going to draw a square, and it's going to be, let's look at the size. So it's the inside, level with the inside edges of the support here, so there to there. it's 2.836, and I'm going to do that as 2.836 as well, so it's completely square. Okay, let's extrude that forwards. It's about probably 4 or 5 inches, so 0.9, 0.8 millimeters. Okay, and then it goes down to a circle, so we're going to create an offset plane from that face. Let's just check that it goes full size. Yeah, so offset plane from that face. I'm going to bring that plane out similar sort of 0.8 millimeters. I'm going to create a sketch on that surface, and then I'm going to project. We don't need to. I'm going to project that square one, and then create a circle, which I believe is slightly smaller. No, it's probably about the same size. So 2.836, and then I'm going to extrude that circle forwards as well. I think maybe not 6 there. Okay, so now you're going to ask, well, how do I get from that square to that circle shape? Well, I'm not going to try and create the same profiles where it's got cut off sides. I'm just going to use the Loft Tool, and I'm going to select that square profile, go through to that circular profile. You can see how it's creating something similar. It's not perfect, but it's very, very similar. What you can try and do is you could change these settings. So at the moment it's connected. You could try tangent. See what effect that has. So that one I'm not convinced. Yeah, let's just undo them. Let's try again. Go from that surface to that surface. So initially that shape, yeah, I'm not happy with that. You can see how it curves up slightly. Let's try the profile one. Let's change it to tangent. No, definitely not. Connected, maybe. Curvature, definitely not. Tangent, no, definitely not. Curvature, definitely not. Probably is going to be having this one connected. That's definitely not tangent. Oops. Ah, what's it done? Okay, messed that up. Yeah, I think going connected with them is probably the right way to go. Okay, so we've got the shape going from that circle to the square. It's not a perfect example of what there is on that model, but it's going to be acceptable to my eyes anyhow. Okay, and then off the front of this circle, we've got this shape coming up here. It looks like maybe a square at an angle. So if we create a sketch on that front surface, we know we've got the centre point is already going to be there. We can use, to get it at a circle, let's do a centre point rectangle, and let's go 1 millimeter, nope, not 11 millimeter, 1mm square. That's probably too big. 8. Extrude that at 0.5. I'm going to do that as a new body initially. And what I'm going to do is move copy the body and then just translate that there. That's not what I want to do. I want to rotate on that circle. That's what I'm after. Make sure it's on bodies, that'll help. And then I can rotate that so that it's at that 45-degree angle that it's after then. Click on OK, and then I'm going to combine those two bodies. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to split this body. I'm going to use the splitting tool as this bottom profile here. Why have you not split? Okay, let's try it enough way. Let's create an offset plane to that floor. Use the splitting tool, so that's the body, the splitting tool being that profile, click on OK. So now we've got this bottom part, we no longer need this, we're just going to, we can turn it off and it won't print, but if you wanted to remove it you can do. And then everything below that point will be flat, flush to the floor. Okay, so I think we're sort of getting there base detail wise on this part. I think I'm going to leave it as it is for the moment, and I think the majority of this detail can be done afterwards using wires and stuff like that. I think this is given a reasonable shape. It's going to look like something like what the actual thing that looks like in real life, and when you add it in next to all of this lot, it's just another part of the detail that will look good, but I think people will look at it and still be quite surprised, and obviously if they don't produce this themselves, I think this is a piece that will stand out on many layouts and people will want one. Let's hear your opinions. Do you think that you'd want me to add more detail in there? If you do, then please let me know, and I'm happy to go back and revisit that part. But no, I think it's coming along pretty well. So I hope you enjoyed watching that episode. It's been quite a long one, and yeah, we'll start continuing moving along the rest of the unit here.